Good morning, everyone. The aim of education is the knowledge, not of fact, but of values. It's on occasions like this we get opportunity to test our knowledge and understanding. A hearty welcome to the scientific session of Agneya 2021, Jnanagni Pradeepam. First of all, let me introduce our first speaker of the day, Dr. Varghese A. Jason. He is working as gastroenterologist in Elite Mission Hospital, Thrissur, and Gem Hospital, Parvatani, Thrissur. I invite Dr. Varghese Jason sir to deliver the presentation on the topic, role of gut microbiota in health and disease.
We can straight away start.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good morning to all the senior faculty, senior members, and my dear delegates and postgraduate students. At the very outset, I'd like to thank the organizers of this national conference, especially Dr. Giri Gauri Shankar and Dr. Giri for giving me this wonderful opportunity to interact with my colleagues of Ayurvedic Division of Medical Science. It is indeed an honor, and the topics selected is also a wonderful topic. I was just discussing with Dr. Giri, and he was so thrilled with the topic because he feels that it is a topic which is very much dear and near to the Ayurvedic profession. Just can you put on the slides, please? The topic is gut microbiota. Slides on the just a second. First slide like just a second. Yes, excuse me. I'll just get the slides in order. This one. Can you remove that? Because this is on the slide. I don't, so that the video won't be there, no? Is it okay if there is no video? I hope so. Okay.
Excuse me, sir. Can you please try clicking on the slide, please?
Yeah.
Mouse. Can you please try?
Yeah.
Yes, that will be fine, sir. Thank you.
Fine. So, to continue, when I was discussing with Dr. Giri, he was telling that the Ayurvedic profession, that is, initially the Ayurveda was for the gods, then it came down to the human beings through Rishi Bharadwaj, and now it is a very popular mode of treatment in patients, especially in India and also abroad. And microbiomes and bacteria are very important aspect in the management of patients in Ayurveda. So from the very words which was chosen to make the heading of this topic itself, I can understand to what extent you people are aware of this gut microbiota, because the word health and disease both has been used in the introduction. That means that gut microbiota is important to have a healthy life, as well as if the microbiota becomes disturbed and pathogenic organisms come in, there will be a disease state. So what I'll try is that this is a little bit of a complicated topic, but I'll use simple terms, simple terminology, so that this can be used as an introduction into this new branch of science. So when we think or when we hear about microbes, what comes to our mind? It is definitely infections, lots of infections. respiratory tract, urinary tract, meningitis, gastrointestinal tract infections. But this is only a minority group of bacteria which are pathogenic and produce illness. There are thousands of other microorganisms which coexist in our body and has got beneficial effect, health related beneficial effects. So that is very important, and we need not be afraid of microbiota, but they are really our friends and are a part of our organ system itself. So there are few definitions which we should be knowing. So what is microbiota defined as? It is nothing but a community of microorganisms. It can be the bacteria, virus, fungus, whatever it is, which is living in a specific environment. In our context, the topic which we are dealing with, it is the gastrointestinal system. So the microbiota which lives in our stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine is the microbiota of GI tract. Another terminology which we come across is microbiome. It is the genetic material of this bacteria. This is used for research purpose. Metagenomics is the field of molecular biology, research, where they use complex techniques to identify the different microbes in our gut and determine which of them are beneficial. So, if you take our human body and the number of bacteria present in different part of our body, if you go through this part, I am showing through with the cursor, the human body contains approximately 10 to the power of 13 cells. Okay, but if we take into consideration the number of bacteria in our body, it is 10 to the power of 14. More cells, bacterial cells, 10 times more bacterial cells are present in our body. If you take into consideration all the genes, there are 23,000 genes in a human body, but there are 3.3 million genes of bacteria in our body. Mainly the bacteria we see in the nose, the mouth, skin, respiratory system, gastrointestinal system, and the genitourinary system. When we take the concentration of bacteria per gram of cellular component, stomach, as we all know, contains acid. The pH will be 2, which is really very acidic. So the number of bacteria is just 10 to 100 cells per gram. As you go down through the small intestine, the bacteria and the duodenum is 10 raised to 3. By the time it reaches ileum, it becomes 10 raised to 7. And by the time we reach the distal colon, it becomes 10 raised to 12. That's a lot of bacteria per gram of cells content in the large bowel. So, what are these functions? What is the benefit? It functions like a metabolic organ. It's just like an external hard disk, 10 TB hard disk. That is, it does the functions which our body has not evolved. And this is some sort of a blessing given by the God. It works and does lots of good things for our body, and that's what we are going to go through in the next slides. Now, how do each and every individual acquire his microbiota? You may be aware that our babies or the fetus in the uterus is concerned to be relatively germ-free. So from a germ-free environment in the uterus during delivery. That when child comes out through the vaginal cavity, vagina contains lots of bacteria. When the child, the few minutes it takes to pass through the vaginal channel, it sucks in lots of secretions from the vagina, which is partially contaminated with little bit of fecal matter. Those who have worked in gynecology and taken delivery would have known when a lady delivers, a little bit of fecal matter also comes out when the head pushes down through the vagina. And this vaginal secretion, along with this fecal matter, is sucked into the child through the mouth and the nose. And from there begins the gut microbiota proliferation in that child. And a healthy child is obviously nursed along with his or her mother and breastfed. The breast milk is also a source of prebiotic and delivers useful bacteria to the child. A child, when he grows up, develops the adult colonization by the age of 3. So, what are the main phyla of bacteria? It's the bacteroids and the firmicutes, almost 90% of the gut microbiota. Each and every individual will have his own distinct pattern of microbiota, and it remains almost stable throughout his lifetime. So those people with a good, healthy group of microbiota will have health. They will be free of many major diseases and can complete their life in a very fruitful way. So these are the microbiota composition. We are dealing with gut microbiota. The main microbiota which we see in the gut are the firmicutes, the bacteroids, the actinobacteria, and the proteobacteria. There are, if you see this number, more than 1,000 species of bacteria in our gastrointestinal system. That's really a big number. Minimum number of bacteria is seen in the urogenital tract. So, what's the role of feeding and in an infant from the very birth itself? A baby born of vaginal delivery, nursed with the mother, roomed in with the mother, and breastfed has got the best microbiota. On the other end of the spectrum, we have babies delivered by cesarean section. Usually these babies many a time will be premature, maybe unhealthy, and will be admitted to the neonatal ICU. And obviously they will be fed on formula feeds, and if they have got sepsis or infection, will be given IV antibiotics. So a vaginal birth healthy baby will have excellent microbiota, but a cesarean section baby will have colonization with different group of bacteria, not bifidobacterium or lactobacillus, but with Actinobacter, Klebsiella, Enterobacter, or Clostridia, which are not as beneficial as lactobacillus. So this is the point which is the central theme of our lecture today. A hidden metabolic organ are the gut microbiota. What all are the functions? In a pictorial way, it has been depicted that it is involved in the metabolism of dietary components, especially the fibers, undigestible materials. It boosts our immune system. It regulates our intestinal motility. It has got a vital function in synthesis of vitamins and metabolism of bile acids and cholesterol. How do these microbes in the intestine protect us See, as you may be knowing, the intestines are lined with enterocytes, colonocytes. Small intestine with enterocytes, large intestine with colonocytes. There are villi for the digestion and absorption, and there are crypts. So these microbes will adhere to the mucosa and form a thin layer covering the intestine. What happens? All these healthy, useful bacteria will displace the pathogenic bacteria from getting adherent to the intestinal mucosa. In addition to that, this healthy bacteria will secrete antimicrobial factors which will destroy the harmful bacteria. It also stimulates the immune system development of the host. This bacteria secretes cytokines, which will promote anti-inflammatory action. That means if there is any inflammation in the intestine, it will be suppressed, and also regulates the immunity, T cells of the body. It also forms a barrier fortification with enhanced mucin production. The mucin forms a protective covering. It also secretes IgA immunoglobulin, which acts against the pathogenic organisms, and also tightens the junction between the enterocytes, so that pathogenic bacteria will not be able to penetrate the intestine and go to the submucosa and then enter the blood. Metabolic function is the metabolism of production of short-chain fatty acids. It, to some extent, metabolize the dietary carcinogens. So cancer-forming substances in our diet are metabolized and destroyed by this bacteria, and some sort of a cancer surveillance it does. Synthesize vitamins, and especially vitamin K, B complex, and so on. So this is a pictorial representation of what we were discussing earlier. The metabolic function, it has got a protective function, and a protective function in the structural and histological level. So this graph, what you see here is a green line. That is the person with a healthy gut microbiota, born of vaginal delivery, good genetics, good diet, no antibiotics in his young age, and there is no major metabolic or inflammatory disease. These people will have excellent gut microbiota and protects them from all the adverse events. But there are some unfortunate people born of cesarean section and so on, with lots of infections, which will disturb the normal development of microbiota, and we don't get that beneficial effects of microbiota, and they have inflammation and damage to the body. So what are the factors which alters the gastrointestinal ecosystem, which destroys good microbes? These are the first and foremost, especially in modern medicine, antibiotics. When we give antibiotics, obviously it enters our intestine, and the effect is destruction of bacteria. We are giving it to destroy the pathogenic bacteria, but at the same time, the useful gut microbiota is also destroyed by antibiotics. Other factors are psychological factors, physical stress, radiation, which reduces immunity, and altered peristalsis. If there is a short bowel syndrome or there is a resection of gut, there will be proliferation of pathogenic bacteria in the gut. Very important thing is the dietary changes. In Ayurveda, all of you are very familiar with Patya, where there is restriction of certain foodstuffs in certain illnesses. Here, a person consuming more of vegetarian food rich in fiber automatically will have a very good gut microbiome. But on the contrary, those who consume lots of fat as well as lots of red meat will have different groups of bacteria and they are not that beneficial for it. There are lots of methodology to study the human microbiome. All those things are mainly for the scientists and researchers. And only the bottom line is that it is not possible to culture all the 1,000 species of bacteria. Many of them are anaerobic. They have got very fastidious requirement, and it is going to be very difficult to culture all those bacteria. So they have used different molecular biology techniques like PCR, next generation sequencing, shotgun sequencing, and 16S RNA sequencing and similar techniques. We will not go to the details because this is only for the researchers. Now, we will slowly change our focus from normal physiology, normal function of gut microbiota, the metabolic organ, to the level where it gets disturbed, it is replaced. That situation is called dysbiosis. So what happens in this situation? The good bacteria is partially or completely replaced by pathogenic and harmful bacteria. The net result is all the beneficial effects of good microbiota will be lost and the harmful effect of this pathogenic bacteria will occur in the host. So this is the simple way of explaining dysbiosis. We see dysbiosis in many of the gastrointestinal diseases. The FBD stands for functional bowel disease. IBD is inflammatory bowel disease. Inflammatory bowel disease means ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. CDI is a very important condition. It's the short form for Clostridium difficile infection, a condition which we usually see in patients who are really sick, who are given multiple antibiotics for a long time, or severe trauma, burns, or on ventilator. These people will develop infection with Clostridium difficile, which produce a condition called pseudomembranous colitis, a colitis with lots of diarrhea. And if you do a colonoscopy, you will see lots of membranes in the colon. So dysbiosis, and there are lots of methodologies in which we will treat this Clostridium difficile, which will be coming to in the subsequent slides. Alteration of gut microbiota can produce cancer, allergies, and metabolic diseases. Some microbiota will induce obesity, type 1 diabetes, and NASH. Of late, NASH, all of you may be knowing about NASH. It is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. There's a new epidemic, a disease of the affluent, more in the Western community. But now it is also present in our India also, where obesity is on a rise. Here, there is inflammation and fibrosis of the liver, and the microbiota plays a pivotal role in the causation of this disease. So in gut dysbiosis, there is an imbalance of gastrointestinal bacterial communities. There is overabundance of harmful bacteria and there is specific scarcity of useful bacteria. And these are the diseases which we had alluded to in the previous slides, which are the bacteria also is a cofactor in the possession of this illness. And non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, especially as an Ayurvedic physician, you may be knowing diet is very important. A person whose diet is mainly based on fat with less of vegetarian and fiber food, there will be dysbiosis. Dysbiosis lead to PAPs, that is, this is a pathology-associated molecular pattern which increases the permeability of the intestine. The crucial word is the increased permeability of the intestine. The toxic bacteria, toxic materials are taken up into the blood, which reach the liver. A healthy liver, where it induces lipogenesis, the fat is deposited into the liver. Subsequently, all the inflammatory mediators will produce inflammation and necrosis of the liver cells, which progresses to non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. At a later stage, these patients will develop 10 to 20% of them will develop cirrhosis of liver, and unfortunate few will develop hepatocellular carcinoma also. In ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease also there is dysbiosis. There is lots of pathogenic organisms since the luminal enterocytes and the colonocytes are disturbed. It enters the submucous and produces chronic inflammation. Now, we reach a stage, the third stage. Initially we discussed about normal bacteria and their uses and about harmful bacteria and dysbiosis. And now, how will we manage a person who has got dysbiosis, bad bacteria, who does not have good bacteria in their intestine? The approach is one, use of prebiotics. Two, supplementation of probiotics. Three, reconstitution of the bacterial population by fecal microbiota transplantation. Fourth, lots of bad bacteria is there in the intestine, give antibiotics, destroy them, and then give good probiotics. Now, what are prebiotics? Prebiotics are nothing but substances or food material which will encourage the growth of healthy microbiota. So you give food for healthy microbiota. What is probiotics? Probiotics are live bacteria which are useful if you take it in a capsule or a liquid form, which will go and adhere to the mucosa and develop in the intestine. Fecal transplantation is transplantation of fecal matter. We will be coming to it in the subsequent slides. So probiotics are the live microorganisms which, when administered in adequate amounts, confers a health benefit which is useful to the host. What are the useful strains of probiotic? As all of us know, one is lactobacillus, well known. The other strain is some groups of streptococci, bifidobacterium. Lactobacillus and bifidobacterium are very important. Different strains of bifidobacterium are there. Saccharomyces boulardii. It's an yeast and has been used in different trials in different disease processes and have been found to be very useful in the management of those diseases. So what should be the characteristic of a good probiotic? Obviously, these are live bacteria. So first of all, we should be able to process them, produce them, store them as capsules or liquids without getting destroyed. Once we swallow it, it should not be destroyed either by the acid in the stomach or by the enzymes in the intestine. Once it reaches the intestine, it should be able to attach to the intestinal epithelia and colonize there and proliferate there and produce their beneficial effects on the host. It should not produce any harmful pathogenic or toxic effect on the host, and it should be able to utilize the nutrients and substrates in our normal diet. Once these probiotics colonize in our intestine, it starts to produce the beneficial effects. It produces antimicrobial compounds, which will destroy the pathogenic organisms which enter our gastrointestinal tract each and every day by producing acids, hydrogen peroxides, carbon dioxide, acetaldehyde, and bacteriocins. Bacteriocins are bacterial antibiotics secreted by the bacteria which will destroy the harmful pathogenic organisms. These probiotics should co-aggregate, that is, live in harmony with other normal flora of the intestine and should not produce any disease or induce immune reaction in the host. So, what are the beneficial effects of probiotics? If you have listened to the previous slides, the beneficial effects of probiotics are the same as the beneficial effect of a good gut microbiota, which we acquire by our normal physiology. So it activates the immune system, it produces less allergy to the foodstuffs, lowers the blood ammonia and cholesterol level, which has got health benefits, produces vitamins like B complex, vitamin K, and folic acid. And probiotics usually we give after antibiotic therapy. So it helps in the normalization of the intestinal flora after antibiotic therapy and acts as immunomodulators. Immunomodulation means it will not induce unnecessary inflammation. It will suppress unnecessary inflammation and will promote the useful cytokines. And it will also have a beneficial effect in destroying the malignant cells. Other effect is it digests the foods and and competes with the pathogenic organisms, so that the pathogenic organisms are starved and eliminated. And many of the beneficial effects we have already alluded. So this is a diagrammatic representation of how probiotic acts, which we have already discussed in the previous slides. There are different forms. The most important form is dairy products, egg yogurts, fortified foods. And you get it as capsules, tablets, drops, lozenges, freeze-dried capsules, which has to be stored at a specific temperature. And lots of different preparations are there. We should be a little careful when we give it to critically ill patients who are severely immunosuppressed because it may produce an infection. So we should be careful those who are having a central line, those who have got lactose intolerance, and all we should be a little careful. So these are little few of the common proprietary preparations of probiotics which we see. BSL-3, a lot of trials and investigations has gone through with this preparation, it contains mainly Streptococcus, Bifidobacterium, and Lactobacillus. Most of them will have both Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. Saccharomyces boulardii, which we see in Econom, is a yeast which also has been used in different trials. Now, a little bit of the prebiotics. A dietary prebiotic, because as an Ayurvedic postgraduate and a physician, you should be very, very much aware of the diet, because all the pathya and other things, I think the physician will be following more than a surgeon. So prebiotic is basically food material which we give, which will enhance the growth of good microbiota, are selectively fermented ingredients in the food, which we'll be coming to later. Most of them are dietary fibers, and they are non-digestible oligosaccharides. What does that mean? Non-digestible means these substances cannot be digested with the enzymes which human beings produce, but this can be fermented upon by the microbiota and can be used as food for the colonocytes, the short-chain fatty acid, and so on. So this also has to be resistant to the gastric acidity and the enzymes, and should improve the growth of healthy bacteria. A few examples. If you take the food products which we have, which we take in our place: wheat, oats, banana, onion, garlic, leek. Leek is something like a spring onion, a leafy vegetable, apple, cocoa, and flax seeds. All this contains lots of oligosaccharides, which will be beneficial for us. So in milk products, you get beta-galactosidase, and soya bean, potato, maize. All this contains lots of prebiotics useful for the microbiota. A special mention about the breast milk. Breast milk has got lots of oligosaccharides, and it is very useful for the growth of normal microbiota in the baby. The mechanism of action, again, is almost similar as probiotic or a good bacteria, and this is the diagrammatic representation. Prebiotic produces lots of short-chain fatty acid. It reduces the risk of cancer. It reduces the cholesterol level. It reduces the amount of ammonia and is used in the treatment of encephalopathy, and reduce the level of pathogenic microorganisms and prevents infection. A little bit of comparison between prebiotic and the probiotic. Prebiotic is a dietary fiber, probiotic is live bacteria. Prebiotic is not affected by the storing conditions. It nourishes the beneficial bacteria in the gut, the bacteria which is already there. There is no add-on bacteria. But probiotic has to go and get adherent and survive in the gut. So prebiotic is always better than probiotic in a healthy person. A word of symbiotic, it is just an add-on terminology where a prebiotic and a probiotic is given together so that you get the beneficial effect of both. Due to lack of time, we'll not be going through that. So now Dr. Giri had mentioned that there were almost 500 papers for presentation in this meeting, and lots of young researchers are there. So I should also include a few trials where probiotics and similar treatment has been used. So for the interest of young researchers and postgraduates, a few conditions in which probiotics were tried. In acute diarrhea, either lots of trials have been conducted with lactobacillus, few trials have been conducted with Saccharomyces boulardii. The net result was it reduces the duration of diarrhea and duration of hospitalization in severely ill diarrhea affected patients. So it was found to be useful. Travelers diarrhea. You may be knowing the Westerners coming from developed countries to underdeveloped countries. The moment they land in this place and start taking the water and the food from these underdeveloped countries, the E. coli and other similar bacteria present in the food and water will produce diarrhea in them. So if you give probiotics to these individuals, it prevents travelers' diarrhea to a great extent, which is of statistical significance. So useful in infective diarrhea and travelers' diarrhea. And now coming to antibiotic associated colitis and diarrhea. Probiotics reduces the risk by 64%, reduces the severity and the adverse effects of the illness. In irritable bowel syndrome, more than 35 trials have been conducted. The meta-analysis of these trials, which were conducted in more than 3,000 patients, they have come to a conclusion that it has got a favorable effect, especially in the flatulence, irritable bowel, flatulence, abdominal pain, altered bowel, and there is a beneficial effect in patients with irritable bowel syndrome. Ulcerative colitis, you cannot give probiotics as a mainstay of treatment, but whatever you see on the right side of the middle line shows a benefit. So in the maintenance of remission, it has got a beneficial value. In Crohn's disease, we don't have much benefits by giving probiotic. That's why all these are towards the midline. So that means there's no much benefit. Pouchitis is a situation where you remove the deceased colon and produces a pouch. And the inflammation in the pouch can be prevented by giving probiotics to a great extent. H. pylori infection, which produces ulcer and cancer in the stomach. Probiotic alone is not useful. If you give it with the combination of eradicative medicines, it may reduce, it has got more of a success value. Lactose intolerance, it may reduce the symptoms of lactose intolerance. Hepatic encephalopathy. Hepatic encephalopathy, those with decompensated liver disease. Probiotics was supposed to be beneficial, reduces the hepatic encephalopathy and the ammonia level. Secondary prophylaxis of HE, hepatic encephalopathy, also there was beneficial effect. This is a trial, we will not go through it. And in SBP, that is spontaneous bacterial peritonitis in cirrhotic patient, no effect of probiotics. And this is an important slide. I like to call your attention upon this slide because NFLD is very common and rampant in our place. These are 39 cases of liver biopsy proved NFLD patients. This NAS score, what you see is the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease associated score. The histology improved, the ballooning of the hepatocytes, the inflammation and fibrosis, everything improved. And the enzymes, that is the ALT and the inflammatory mediators, everything came down in these patients. That means this is a recent trial which has been published in BMJ in 2019, just a couple of years ago, conducted from, I think, PGH Chandigarh. And this is really a very good result because NAFLD, as you know, will progress to cirrhosis of liver as well as hepatocellular carcinoma. So probiotics given for a long period, 1 year, can reduce the severity of NAFLD. This is yet another trial. And probiotics were also found to be very beneficial in preventing sepsis in children, that is infants admitted with severe sepsis, respiratory tract infection, diarrhea, and probiotic co-administration was found to be very useful. So these are just the level of evidences in a different way we are showing, and the probiotic that was used, infectious diarrhea, antibiotic associated diarrhea, and so on. All these are the trials where it was found to be very beneficial. Now coming to the last part of the lecture, I think I have taken a lot of time, and this is going to be brief now. This is the fecal microbiota transplantation. So while treating a patient, you have got dysbiosis, you have given prebiotic, you have given probiotic, patient is not improving, he is having severe dysbiosis and antibiotic associated diarrhea. Then the last resort which we have in our armamentarium is a fecal microbiota transplantation. This is a process where we harvest the healthy microbiota from a healthy human being, and it is introduced into the colon of the deceased person. And these bacteria in the fecal matter will get implanted and will produce beneficial effect. And it has been found to be very useful in pseudomembranous colitis. The concept of FMT is bacterial interference. That is, this healthy bacteria will go and adhere in the mucosa, colonize there, and displace the harmful bacteria from the intestine. It also produces bacteriosin, which will kill the colonic flora, and has been found to be very beneficial in Clostridium difficile infection, and it is more beneficial than vancomycin. It can be used as a single treatment or can be used on multiple locations, and the donor should be healthy. And the infusion is usually through an enema or through colonoscope, and found to be useful in Clostridium difficile. It has been studied. This is more in an experimental stage, in a research stage. So has been tried in the treatment of IBD, IBS, obesity, NASH, alcoholic hepatitis, and all. And later, I think in the next 10 years, the correct picture of FMT will evolve, and therapeutic manipulation of the gut microbiota holds a promise and maybe eventually prove beneficial for other conditions. So with that, I come to the conclusion of this lecture. So, and then it is always a custom to give a take-home message. So to sum up all that we have discussed now, in a nutshell, good microbes in our intestine functions as an external system which is not our own and provide health benefit. If these good microbes are disturbed, then we get a state called dysbiosis, and it can produce disease state. Vaginal delivery should be encouraged as much as possible. Breastfeeding should be encouraged, and the baby should be roomed in with the mother. Third and most important part for all of us is that our food should contain yogurt, banana, onion, garlic, leeks, wheat, oats. All these are prebiotic, contains lots of fiber. And this will encourage the growth of healthy microbes in our intestine. As Indians especially, it is always advisable to consume mainly a vegetarian-based diet. And if you are a non-vegetarian, consume fish more than red meat and fat. Probiotics and fecal microbiota transplantation has got its own indications in the treatment of many GI and non-GI diseases, and has to be used judiciously. Yet another very important thing is that avoid unnecessary and frequent use of antibiotics, because it has emerged as one of the most important reasons for dysbiosis. With this, I like to conclude my talk. I'd like to thank the chairpersons and all the delegates for the patient attention you have given to me. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for giving your valuable insights on the topic role of gut microbiota in health and disease. Now this session is open for discussion. Participants may ask their doubts or questions directly or write in the chat box.
Thank you, Varghese sir, for a wonderful presentation. So I'll be reading out few of the questions that came in the chat while you were taking the class. Sir, the first one is by Dr. Mamta, and she's asking, my question to the speaker that we have Basti Chikitsa. Please give your inputs on this Basti Chikitsa. In fact, the next question is also on the role of Basti Chikitsa in microbiota.
So, Dr. Giri, can you tell me what is Basti Chikitsa?
Sorry, sir. Basti is a type of enema, sir. We give medications through the anal canal and thus evacuate, in our terms, the doshas which is affected.
So, what is the content of this Basti?
Sir, usually we give medications, decoction as well as oils also. There are two types of Bastis like that. So what is your opinion on this enema treatment that, that can, how it can affect the microbiota of the system?
Okay. To the dear doctor, thing is that I am a modern medicine gastroenterologist. In our practice, we give enema for bowel evacuation, and in some conditions like inflammatory bowel disease, we give steroid or mesalamine enema. And fecal microbiota transplantation and Basti Chikitsa cannot be equated. Basti Chikitsa, I think, is something unique to the Ayurvedic practice, and I don't think I should be in, I am not the right person to comment on that, but fecal microbiota transplantation is something a little different. Here we give microbiomes and which are supposed to go and adhere to the mucosa, colonize the mucosa and produce beneficial effects on a long-term basis. So Basti, I am really sorry, I cannot, I think Dr. Giri can contribute.
Yes. Perhaps Dr. Gauri Shankar sir is here and Giri sir is also here. Yes.
Sir, may I, sir? Jason, sir?
Yeah, please, sir.
The content of Basti is different. It is having oil and kashaya, that is decoction and other things. So its specific gravity is different. And actually, I think from your talk and everything, and my knowledge, I think it can interfere with the microbiome, and any dysbiosis can be, there's a possibility that on the reverse pharmacological thought, it may indulge or it may correct the dysbiosis of the colon, so that neurological diseases and all type of diseases, whichever according to that content of the Basti. Because we know that clinically it is proven, but it has to be proven whether it is acting at the level of microbiota. Maybe it is maybe acting at the level of microbiota. There is no other way than acting. So the content in fecal transplantation, actually we are giving that fecus in a capsule as oral. This is oil, decoction, honey, and in a particular proportion. So the specific gravity is different. So it encourages, I think it encourages the growth of anaerobes, which is useful to our body. That may be, sir.
Thank you, sir. Let's go to the next questions, Varghese sir. So the next question is the role of microbiota in NCD with special reference to inflammation.
NCD?
Uh,
Sanction.
non-communicable disease, I think.
Non-communicable disease, in our this thing, it will be ulcerative colitis, functional bowel disease, or Crohn's disease. So you want to know the role of microbiota in those diseases. Am I right?
Yes, sir. I think so.
Yeah. So microbiota has got a role in inflammatory bowel disease. There were a few slides in my talk, but it was a little too big and may not be of your liking, because in the pathogenesis of inflammatory bowel disease, we don't have a real pathogen. It is multifactorial disease. And researchers have found out that there are lots of pathobionts, or that is pathogenic organisms in the small intestine and large intestine of patients with inflammatory bowel disease. These pathogenic organisms will be pro-inflammatory. It will destroy the epithelium, the tight junctions. So all the toxic elements and the pro-inflammatory cytokines are stimulated and produce the inflammation. So if there is a good microbiota, these pathobionts may be displaced and may be beneficial in the treatment. If in one of the slides I had also put, but I did not tell you that in the, I don't know whether you know, there is few stages in the management of inflammatory bowel disease. Like if there is ulcerative colitis, which is severe, you have to induce remission of the illness first. Then remission means severe illness has to be controlled. Then you have to maintain the remission so that the healing process go on. For inducing remission, microbiota is not useful. In patients with very mild form of inflammatory bowel disease, like ulcerative colitis, if you give probiotics, it may be useful. Fecal microbiota transplant trials have not emerged to the level of being used on a clinical practice. It's still in the trial basis, and whatever has evolved till now has not been very encouraging.
Okay, sir. Sir, the next question is a leaky gut in the long run always leading to NAFLD?
Yeah, that's a very nice question. It's more in league with our thought process. So a leaky gut has been proposed as a reason for NAFLD, especially those people who are taking red meat. Lots of fat content will have, instead of bacterioids and lactobacillus and all, they'll have more of firmicutes in their intestine. It has got more of a pro-inflammatory effect, so that the tight junctions between the enterocytes are weakened. And through the leaky gut, I had shown a slide where you get that PAMS, that is pathogen associated molecular pattern, and through which the toxins go in, and it is taken up by the TLR, that's a toll-like receptors, and which will produce inflammation. And as you know, fatty liver disease is not a single hypothesis, it's a multi-hit hypothesis. There is lipogenesis, there is inflammation, and this leaky gut and the enterotoxins which comes through this leaky gut to the liver definitely plays an important role in the production of fatty liver disease and the perpetuation. Initially, it will be just simple steatosis. Later, it will progress to steatosis with inflammation and necrosis of the hepatocytes. Later, fibrosis, chronic liver disease, cirrhosis, and eventually hepatocellular carcinoma in 10 to 15% of patients. So that's a good question.
Thank you, sir. And I would like to inform all the participants that you can raise your hand. We will unmute you and you will be able to ask the questions directly to sir. Sir, we'll go to the next question. We have Dr. Pallav asking how we rule out that the patient microbiota is disturbed, and either we have to add probiotics with other medicines or not.
thing is that, say, if you are giving a short course of, I think you don't give antibiotics. It's mainly with allopathic line of treatment. When someone comes with, for example, pneumonia, and we are giving an oral antibiotic or IV antibiotic. These antibiotics are destroying the gut microbiota, means the patient will complain of crampy abdominal pain, loose stools, and similar complaints. So we will extrapolate it in such a way that the good bacteria are being destroyed by the antibiotics. So we will add on probiotics to these patients. That's what we usually do. In some instances, the patients will be on prolonged antibiotics. There are sepsis where our antibiotics may not be active. We give a course of cephalosporin, it's not active. Then you give a course of penicillin group of antibiotics, including meropenem. It's not acting, and even if it is acting, the response is partial. So you have to continue it. Instead of 5 days, you may be giving it 14 days, still the patient is not improved. Then these group of patients are quite liable to develop antibiotic associated colitis. It's a very, very serious illness, and if not recognized promptly and treated, we may lose the patient. What we do is that we do toxin A and B of Clostridium difficile in the stool. If it is positive, it is confirmatory of antibiotic associated colitis. Or else put in a colonoscope. Have a look. You'll be volcano-like eruptions, lots of pseudo membranes and mucus in the stool with intervening normal mucosa. So in these conditions, we have to give adequate doses of probiotics for a long period. Along with that, in pseudomembranous colitis, we also give vancomycin, which is a topical antibiotic which has got profound effect against Clostridium difficile. Is that sufficient?
Hope so, sir. The next question is from Isra, but the question I think is can be answered by Dr. Giri. The role of Panchakarma in dysbiosis.
The same thing, that is Nasya, Brahmanam Virejanam Nasyam Niruha Nivasam. So the dysbiosis is actually gut microbiota related to our mostly Vasti and Virejana, actually, whatever comes. But Virejana has got contraindicated in several conditions, which we closely follow that. It can be seen that with the conditions which exist the dysbiosis of the microbiota, in that condition, for example, in Virejana, if I have given sufficient or not sufficient dose, small dose, Virejana not occurs, and there are some conditions where Virejana not occurs even after giving that medicine. In that condition, Sneha Vasti is indicated. So due to the Ruksha Koshta. So these conditions can be called as the dysbiosis. Can be considered, because whatever conditions servers saying that, and somebody asked beautifully that the leaky gut syndrome. Actually, this is a condition of AMA. In dysbiosis means, I really want to say that actually in the concluding part, now I am saying, is related to AMA. So in that condition, naturally we go for Shamana therapy only, not Panchakarma. But even after Shodhana therapy, Acharya rightly indicated the Snehapana. So Karmanam Vamanadinam Punirapyandarandari. Snehasvedo Purayinjida, Sneham Ande Vilayacha. So before Snehapana, and after that also Snehapana is indicated on the basis that there is a possibility of tissue damage, that is Mathagopa. So tissue damage in the sense in the metabolic level as in the local area of gut microbiota also. So that is why. So even after Shodhana Karma, the appetite will increase, it says that, but it takes time. Charaka says that again the vitiated dosha will be coming into Koshta, just like leaking. So that the appetite will be coming. That is why after that, Snehapana, every Shodhana, we are giving other type of kanji diet, etc. So that's an important factor. So Panchakarma corrects it, provided dysbiosis is basically ama. In that condition, we have to go for Shodhana, especially in a chronic illness. The Doshagati is Tiryak. So Shamana is indicated rather than Shodhana therapy. After Shamana therapy, so there is a translation of concept that if you say that for long-standing the Amapajana will occur, but in a chronic disease, just like if you take rheumatoid arthritis, even though after several years the ama persists. So that's a different thought. Translation has to be added. So actually correcting that dysbiosis panchakarma therapy, especially Vasti, Sneha Vasti is useful, but only after Amapajana. That's my thought process. Sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, Varghese sir, the next question is there any relationship between gut microbiome dysbiosis and choledocholithiasis?
Gut microbiome dysbiosis. I think
Dysbiosis.
choledocholithiasis, the basic pathology. Choledocholithiasis means initially first we should consider about cholelithiasis, because usually the stones are formed in the gallbladder and migrate into the common bile duct. That state is called choledocholithiasis. Only 10 to 15% of people will have primary choledocholithiasis. That is, they will have stone formed primarily in the CBD. So this condition usually will get, especially in oriental cholangiohepatitis, where there is dilatation of the bile duct at different places, and oriental cholangiohepatitis, otherwise known as RPC, that is recurrent pyogenic cholangitis. Here, there is recurrent cholangitis in these patients, infection in the bile duct, and stone formation. Gut dysbiosis and choledocholithiasis, I don't think any trials have been conducted so far because I could not come across, but infection in the bile duct definitely can produce, because the nidus for stone formation is always supposed to be a bacteria around which the calculus is formed. So there may be a relation. I think someone has to take up that topic and do research on that.
So the next question is from Dr. Vivek. He is asking in simple way, how can we maintain our gut flora?
That is I think is the best question of the day, because the purpose of all this lecture is to have a very good gut flora. So stick to the basics. What are the basics to have a healthy life? You cannot have a very good gut flora and very bad other parts of the body. You should have a disciplined lifestyle, which you Ayurvedic physicians always emphasize upon. Time of waking up in the morning, the regular exercise, taking lots of water, fruits, vegetables, and relaxation for the mind. We should not be overweight. I had also mentioned that we should not take excess fat in our food. Concentrate on fibers and especially green vegetables. It is also very useful, even though may not be very useful for microbiota, but and other fibers also you have to consume. Don't take much of red meat. Automatically, you will have a very good gut microbiota. Refrain from addictions, especially alcohol, smoking, and other addictions. And don't consume antibiotics for trivial reasons. Just that I am having a sore throat, I am going for a tour tomorrow, I'll start taking ampicillin cloxacillin, or I'll take Augmentin. Don't take antibiotics for trivial reasons. I think that will be sufficient enough to get a good microbiota.
Thank you, sir. Next one is from Dr. Remya. She is asking, please elaborate the assessment of gut microbiome in a clinical research setting.
I think I am not the right person, because see, I am a clinician, and I had shown few slides. clinical setting where you can do research is very, very difficult. It is on the tertiary level because more than 1,000 species of bacteria. Most of them are anaerobic. If Dr. Ramya has worked in microbiology, I have not worked. Thing is that to maintain an anaerobic environment where you culture a bacteria is going to be difficult. And this 1,000 bacteria, it is practically impossible to culture. They are not culturable. For that only, they have used techniques like PCR, shotgun therapy technique, and RNA, 16S RNA sequencing. All these are genetic technology, which is entirely a different branch where the researchers get the genetic material of each and every bacteria and analyze. From there only they identify the bacteria. So it is going to be very difficult. In India itself, I think there will be very few labs which will be doing that. And those who are interested has to contact those people. I think from a practical viewpoint, I don't think in Kerala we will be doing all those things. Okay.
Okay, sir. We have another question from Dr. Harshita. She is asking the role of gut biota in enteric nervous system. Enteric nervous system.
Enteric, that is in IBS. Basically,
so, yes.
Yeah, that is the motility and all. It has been implicated in the IBS. IBS, if you have a very good microbiota, all the neurotransmitters, you know, the brain-gut axis, the gut has 10 times more neurons than the brain. So, and it is connected through the spinal cord. So each and every activity of the gut will be reflected on the brain. So all these cytokines, all those things which are secreted by the gut microbiota, which increases which are pro-inflammatory, will produce IBS-like symptoms, which are anti-inflammatory and which reduces the allergic reactions like IgE level, will reduce the symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome. And on the molecular level, it will be the interleukins and other things which will be acting on the nerve endings and the neurotransmitters which will be producing the effect. And all those things are still in that research. That's what I was telling. This topic is just coming up in the last 10 to 15 years. And it's really hot since the last 5 years. So all this has to evolve and has to be streamlined in the next few years after proper research.
Yes, sir. So the next question is, please elaborate the influence of microbiota in maintaining mood and well-being.
Yeah, this is almost the same because all these things I have also gone through this. I have gone through my all those books and all. Lots of, that's what I was telling Dr. Giri also earlier, that lots of researchers have written lots of vague things. No definite. They are telling that it requires more research. But in autism, in mood, depression, and all these conditions, an observation has been made that those who have got a good microbiota will have beneficial effect. And if there is dysbiosis, there will be harmful effect. But exactly what is the pathway through which it is modulated has to be really found out. So it is for the researchers.
The role of microbiota in achalasia cardia.
Achalasia cardia is a degenerative disease, and as of now, there is no microbiota role in this disease. There is dilatation therapy, including POEMS, where we do endoscopic resection of the muscle at the lower end. There will be spasm of the muscle at the lower end of the esophagus. I think there is no role.
We have Dr. Mary asking, what are the conditions where probiotics are strictly contraindicated?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was a slide on that. Probiotics are contraindicated in severely ill, immunocompromised individuals. One, because it may become invasive and may enter the blood and produce bacteria. So in these conditions, we may not give probiotics. Those people who are allergic to yeast or yeast, there may be people, we should not give Saccharomyces boulardii because it is an yeast preparation. And those with short bowel syndrome, short gut, that is resection of large portion of the small intestine, those with ileojejunal bypass surgeries, where there is short bowel, we are not supposed to give probiotics or should be given with caution. Yet another condition is that of central venous catheter, because here also we usually put central venous catheter in patients who are really sick. So we should be very cautious while giving this.
Sir, in the antibiotic-induced dysbiosis, how many days will it take to regain the normal state?
So antibiotic-associated diarrhea is a large spectrum. It may be very mild diarrhea in few patients. It will subside in few days. You might have seen those who have taken antibiotics. While taking antibiotics, you may have a little bit of alteration of bowel. After finishing the course of antibiotics, it becomes normal. But if it progresses to a higher level, it will produce pseudomembranous colitis. This is a more grievous or grave situation where is frank ulceration of the colon, pseudomembrane and all, and it can also take the life of the patient. So that and the treatment protocol, initially in pseudomembranous colitis, we give vancomycin along with probiotics, adequate doses of probiotics 2 to 3 times a day, and we give it for 4 weeks. Then taper it 2 times a day, and fortunate few will improve with that. Or vancomycin has to be given, and in some cases fexdomycin has to be given. And in those, all these fail, we may have given to resort to fecal microbiota transplantation. And that's a good question, but we cannot say because it's a very large, broad spectrum of illness. Few patients may be 10 days, 14 days. Some patients even 2 to 3 months, we may have to give this thing in the probiotic.
Okay, sir. Sir, next we have a question. Will the probiotics in the patient increase the flatulence by process of fermentation?
Yes, it can. In few patients, definitely will complain of flatulence. Prebiotic also, this lactulose is a prebiotic. It also can produce flatulence because basically the bacteria act on it and ferments it. Fermentation always produces lots of gas. It can produce.
Yes, sir. And I would like to inform the participants that you can ask a question directly. If you can raise your hand, we will unmute you and you can ask directly. And sir, the next question is from Dr. Shankar, and he's asking, according to recent study, appendix acts as a reserve of intestinal microbiomes. Does appendixectomy has any effect on this microbiome?
I have not come across any references mentioning that appendixectomy has produced or led to such a complications of dysbiosis, but it's a very interesting thing for thought because appendix may be having microbiome, but the whole gut is having microbiome. So by removing the appendix alone, I don't know, logically speaking, need not, but I have not come across any references regarding that.
Okay, sir. Sir, I think that was the last of the question for this session. So let
Thank
me
you.
hand it over to Dr. Giri to give his
Perfect.
thoughts on this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And before saying thank you, let me 2-3 things I can add so that the Ayurvedic fraternity can connect the concept of microbiota in their future plans of research, because of the fact that most of the delegates are faculties and PG students. And so in the mood, somebody was asking, so that was sir was correctly saying, the British Medical Journal also, it's a politics of nutrition has been mentioned in an editorial. And it is said that the more things are given the question marks, other things are related. And in our, if you go through our acharyas, it's Trayostamba, Trayobastamba has an important role. Ahara, Nidra, and Abramacharya. So Ahara definitely has an important role. And each and every chapter of Chikitsa, if you take, Acharya has given importance to Patya and Avatya. Patya means which is more conductive to body and mind. So somebody was asking which is the simplest way of maintaining that microbiome. That is Viparita Gundechacha. That is it. So in that particular condition, if you are having any disease, you should feel the Viparita Guna. That is in a high grade fever, you like to take hot water. So in that time, do not take alcohol or chilled water. So there's the basic high level spiritual well-being, which can be connected to the thought process. Even your thought process is changing according to your mind. That has been proven that most of the psychological illness precipitates the GI problems also. So that is then, and whenever you are connecting theoretically and the research, you have to think of the concept of Ama and concept of Agni definitely. And somebody has rightly pointed out the concept of leaky gut syndrome. And in US, the leaky gut syndrome and the Ama review has been published. And of course, the grading has been in a small way of research has been conducted there. It is published actually. And Sir has rightly mentioned, and you have to think of role of SCFA, that is short chain fatty acids and gases like butyrate, propanate, and acetate, and their metabolism, which is essential to think in the right path so that we can have a well maintained microbiome person so that the disease will be less. And Sir has given there's a wonderful presentation. Then rather than presentation, is a class. So we enjoyed it. Both Saras have also enjoyed it because everyone was asking the questions. I think this is our real objective of not the mere presentation, but the discussions, and the thought process has to be changed, and the concept has to be changed, and everyone should get a good health in whatever medicine, whether it's Ayurveda, allopathy, homeopathy, it doesn't matter. Actually, good health is an important factor. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind, I say kind, because you are very rightly, sophisticatedly, and very simply presented, taken the class, which is very useful to our PG students, and not only the PG students, but for the faculties also. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.